history behind it. And the history is that my great-grandfather was a former slave. And the tradition at that time was for a slave to take the last name of the slave owner. So if the slave owner's last name was Thompson, then the slave would take that name when they became free. And because of the way my great-grandfather carried himself throughout any circumstance, and I can't think of anything more horrific than slavery, he was kind of given the nickname Polite. And when he became free, he chose that as his last name. And so when I married, I decided to hyphenate my last name and keep my maiden name Polite Wilson to remind me that regardless of the circumstances that I face, it does not have to change my character and the way I show up. And that in the way I show up, it might influence people to see me and treat me differently from their preconceived notions. So I always like to share that story so that it reminds me, especially in my work as a diversity, inclusion, and belonging consultant, as my grandmother used to say, you catch more flies with honey. And it just doesn't pay to be angry about things. You have to meet people where they are. You have to approach people with an open heart, connect with people, and listen to understand versus listening to respond. And then finally, tap into diversity by being culturally curious. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks for that. And before this webinar, I kind of did a little research on you and realized that you have had 30 years of experience in the corporate world. And so I think we're kind of interested in knowing what made you decide to step out of that comfort zone and to start something from scratch, you know, and maybe just as a additional thing, that does the glass ceiling exist, and did it play a part in your decision to step out of that comfort zone?
So I did not make the decision to be out here. The Lord made that decision for me, to be perfectly honest with you, because I was looking forward to finishing my career with the Aerospace Corporation and supporting the Air Force Base as a contractor and retiring from there and building my own coaching practice and continuing with public speaking. And that was not the plan that the Lord had for me, because in November of 2017, my entire small group of internal consultants was laid off because the HR department decided to restructure and they felt that they no longer needed internal consultants. And the way they had done it really caused me to think about the value that they placed on me and the value that I placed on myself. And I decided that I was going to choose the path of least resistance for my soul, because I did not feel it necessary to, again, assimilate with a culture that I did not believe in, with a culture that really did not respect me as an individual. And in particular, I felt as a Black woman. So I felt it would be easier to find other people that valued the gifts and strengths and talents that everyone brings to the table. And I wanted to work with clients that felt about people the way I felt about people. I wanted to work with clients that believed in exhibiting human affirming behaviors and inclusive leadership traits. And it has not been an easy journey. And there have been times where I wondered, Lord, am I out here because this is the plan you have for me? Or am I out here because I'm still kind of smarting behind the fact that I got laid off? And I had to be honest with myself and really think about that and realize that God knows what he's doing, and he's providing for me by sending amazing clients my way. Not only that, to be perfectly candid and worldly for a minute, either when I would go to try and find a job, either I didn't find a job that would interest me or recruiters weren't interested in me. So I had to finally face the fact that this is where God has me. And it's been an amazing journey. I say amazing because it's not always been easy, but it's still been amazing to see God and how he shows up, and to be able to look at situations that I've been through and actually think about scripture. Like I remember a time I was coming around the corner in my house, a corner that I come around all the time. I fell and my laptop hit the floor, pieces flying everywhere. And I'm thinking, God, that's 20 years of work and research in that laptop. What am I going to do? And as I'm crying and praying, the Lord brought to mind if I can create an army out of dry bones, I can restore your information from a laptop. And sure enough, he did it. So it was through some of the most stressful times that I really had to dig into my faith, find some scriptures, trust God, and see how he was going to make a way. And the most amazing thing is my mom kept telling me, if he could do it, if he did it before, he could do it again. I'm like, Mom, you don't understand. That's 20 years worth of work. And she kept saying, if he did it before, he could do it again. And one day I was just sitting down, and it was almost as if the Lord was like physically standing behind me as my partner. And I was whipping out stuff like that was better than some of the old stuff that I had lost on the laptop. So God will find ways to get your attention and let you know what I gave you before, I can give you better in the future if you just trust me.
Wow, it's very good.
You like that, Chandra?
I love it. I
How is
love.
that relating to you? Can you identify with that?
Yeah. I mean, as I was listening to you and also with the two ladies sharing in terms of walking and have faith in God, and I have been feeling going through in terms of that I'm journey with God alone, just only God and I, and yeah, the faith and whatever things along the way. I think the faith in God is the key.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, just trusting Him, whatever has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and also you were sharing that you met people who may not support your values and also wants to work with you. And I have come across with that so many, and I was struggling in my journey. I mean, I've been working in with the nonprofit agency, and now I'm working with the county, and I was working with the Christian agency in Cambodia. I was a missionary there, and sometimes I feel like I was just by myself because I didn't find people who understand me, understand what my directions, what I'm going. I think who was talking about the mentor? I think Jessica, right? Jessica talking about a mentor.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know why I click on this this Zoom meeting tonight, and I think the Lord. I've been questioned about. Say, Lord, I really need some kind of mentors. I need mentors. So I'm just exploring right now. I think I really need somebody along the way, like you said. But it's hard to find somebody who really take time to understand your journey. So that's what was struggling, and now I'm still struggling with that. And faith is the key for me in God to not to give up.
Well, I will tell you, Chandra, that entrepreneurship can be lonely. We have to remember that God is with us. And oftentimes it's mentors and coaches that have been where I'm going that I turn to a lot. So right now I'm going to ask Bella and Zoe to forgive me. I went into facilitator mode because that's what I'm used to doing. So I'm going to hand the back over to Bella or Zoe, whoever's supposed to
Sorry,
ask the
guys.
next question. I'm sorry, ladies.
Okay.
That's all good. Before you became an entrepreneur yourself, were there any hindrance that would have stopped you from pursuing entrepreneurship? If so, what are they?
Yes, the hindrance would be my plans, my own plans for retirement, to go into coaching. But being a consultant is a vehicle that the Lord used to actually give me the desires of my heart, because I love to coach, I love to speak, and I love working with my clients. I was telling Bella, Zoa, and Noah when we were kind of in the virtual green room, I'd said yesterday it was a day full of coaching from 6:30 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. It was one after another after another. I had like a 2-hour break, but yeah, right. Oh, I see that. But I absolutely loved it because I love holding a space for people, and I pray before everything, but particularly the days that I'm coaching folks, I ask the Lord, help me hear what it is you want me to hear and help me say what it is that you want me to say. And a lot of my work is listening to understand so that I can then ask the right questions of my clients, not to tell them what to do, but to help them figure out what to do.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's the That's one of the first times I've heard it framed in that way. Like consulting is actually not telling someone what to do, but then helping them figure it out. So that's
Mhm,
really good.
mhm.
Yeah, on to our next question is, so when you started your venture, which is the Dr. Anita Enterprises, what were the biggest challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them?
The biggest challenges that I faced was not knowing what I didn't know. Have you ever heard that? I don't know what I don't know. Have y'all ever heard that term? Okay, that was the biggest challenge, not knowing what I didn't know. And it's still challenging for me because I like to work in spaces where I know what I'm talking about. The degrees that you mentioned, Bella, that is a really nice integration of different disciplines that complement one another. So I know what I'm talking about. Entrepreneurship, I don't know. I'll just be honest with you guys. I'm out here trying to figure it out like everybody else. There's so much to learn. And if you've never done this before, you don't even know where to start, which is why, to Chandra's point, you definitely need mentors and coaches who've been there, done that, and have the hat to go with it, right? So that they can help you. You don't have to make all the mistakes on your own. Learn from someone else's mistake. And when you do happen to experience a misstep, find the lesson in that and take it forward with you. Um, so I think you also asked me the question, how did I overcome those things? So overcoming the whole, I don't know what I don't know. I have to remember other times where I did things and didn't know what I didn't know. So, but I believed in what I was doing, so I made it happen. So I'm going to give you 3 different examples from the past 20 years when I did something, I didn't know what I didn't know, but I had a passion for it. So the first one was my husband and I incorporated as Stirred Up Creative Works, and we did that specifically to manage my brother, who at the time was a youth pastor and a gospel rap artist. So that was the first thing. Didn't know the first thing about incorporating or managing anybody, but we did that because we had a passion for it. The second thing was producing his demo and 3 different CDs. 1, 2, 3, all of which were on Amazon.com, producing 3 different music videos, all of which got airplay on TBN. Everybody familiar with TBN? The Trinity Broadcast Network? Okay, all of those videos got play on TBN. And then further down the line, establishing a nonprofit whose members ended up participating in my pilot study when I was going back for my PhD. And we were focused on goal setting and mentoring between a group of emerging young professionals and seasoned professionals. So again, those were all things that I did, not knowing what I didn't know, but the purpose was this. When I graduated with my PhD, our keynote that day said, just because you have a PhD doesn't mean you know everything. He said, having a PhD means you know how to figure it out. And that's really the lesson that I'm learning about entrepreneurship, especially when you don't know, you're smart enough to figure it out. And so what I typically say about people is that before I even know anybody, I know 3 things about people. I know 3 things about everybody on this call. Number 1, you're gifted to shift into new levels of success because God is the one who shifted you, or who gifted you. And if you listen to him, you can shift with him. The second thing I know about everybody is that you are packaged with potential for purpose. God has given all of us a purpose, but will we find it? And the third thing that I know about everybody is that you are experienced enough to find answers from within. And when I say find answers from within, I'm not talking about new age stuff. I'm talking about when you settle your spirit and listen to the Holy Spirit, you're going to find some answers. And based on the experiences that you've had, whether they've been good experiences or experiences you prefer to forget, you will find answers based on those experiences, which is why they're called lessons learned. So also, if you'll note the 6 books behind me, I wrote all those within the past 12 months. Other than a dissertation, didn't know the first thing about writing a book, but I did it. And so some of those books led me to having podcasts that I'm getting ready to start up again next month. So all of that to say this, when you don't know what you don't know, but you have a passion for it, you will figure it out. I don't necessarily have a passion for entrepreneurship, but this is a faith journey that the Lord has me on. And I've taken the skills and the education, the experience that I built up over my lifetime. And I'm saying, all right, Lord, you equipped me for a reason. You blessed me to get all these degrees. You blessed me to get all these credentials. Surely it's not just to sit here on a shelf. Let's go and do this thing and make it happen. And one last thing I'll say about hindrances, even if you don't know what you don't know, it's important to take past successes. Like, all these music videos that I never, CDs and videos that I hadn't had a clue as to how to go about, but I had a passion for it. When you think about what you've done and how you've been successful in the past and apply those steps to a current challenge, that's called appreciative inquiry. And appreciative inquiry means, all right, based on this challenge here, what did I do to overcome this challenge and be successful? And what are the things that I did over here that I can apply over here so that I don't feel like I'm starting at a place where I have no clue? Because based on what I did back here, there are some strategies and techniques that I can use over here. So I hope that answers the question. Okay. What you got for me, Zoe? I think you're up next.
In relation to the challenges that you face, has your identity as a woman ever been a challenge? Did it ever make you feel less respected or given less credit? What were the obstacles that you faced that were specific to being a woman entrepreneur?
That's a pretty loaded question, Zoe. So I'll say that being a woman has never gotten in my way because I just do what I want to do. But I will say that being a Black woman has posed some challenges. So when I talk about the fact that being a woman has never gotten in my way, even as a little girl, my mom signed me up for German. And my dad was like, okay, now let's think about this, everybody, real quick. Okay. What is a young little Black girl going to do with German in America? I don't know, but my mom thought it was a good, broadening experience for me. That's cool. And then in junior high school, I had my first paper route. I was the first girl and the first Black girl on that whole route. Moving on in junior college, I was the only Black girl in modeling school. Moving on into adulthood, I was usually the only Black woman attending meetings with engineers and eventually leading those meetings, even though I wasn't an engineer. But what I brought to the table was my ability to ask good questions that would get the other engineers thinking. So being a woman has never been the issue because I realize how I've been gifted to bring something to the table. Being a Black woman is something different because right away when you see me, you see Black first. And some people, when they see Black, they associate assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs about who I am and what I can bring to the table until they see PhD behind my name, and then they see me differently. And that's just a reality of life for me and my experience. So I don't see being a woman getting in the way, but I do see sometimes being a Black woman getting in the way. And that's just everywhere. I mean, even when I was teaching spin cycling classes, I'd have people, come in the room and clearly they're looking around like, where's the instructor? And I just kind of let them think that until I jump on the bike and give them a workout that would kill them because they don't expect that from me. So sometimes it works for me because depending on the audience and who I'm initially dealing with, their expectation is low until I help them realize who I am and what I do and how I'm gifted. Does that answer the question? Okay.
Yes. Wow. I really like how you put like being a woman. Sometimes people associate it with a lot of like the lower expectations, and you kind of just wow them, right? And you give them something that they did not expect. But yeah, in relation to that, like if you were given the opportunity to maybe pursue a different path instead of entrepreneurship, I think you kind of mentioned you don't necessarily have a passion for entrepreneurship, but God placed you on this path. But if given the opportunity, would you pursue a different career path, a safer one than being an entrepreneur?
Without question, yes. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur. I'll be honest with you. And God has been very gracious to be patient with me and walk alongside me as I figure it out. This is not anything that I would go for, but at the same time, I enjoy it because I can't even describe, um, I can't even describe it. On one day, it's like, wow, I'm so glad that I've got, time to myself and my time is my own. And another day, it's like, man, 3:30 until, 9 o'clock. How does anybody do this? One day it's, wow, the ideas just won't stop coming. And the next day it's like, I can't figure this out. It's right. It's two ends of the spectrum. And very rarely is it a smooth middle, but that's part of the process. And I think what I find frustrating is, earlier we were talking about, when I was talking with Bella and Noah and Zoe, we were talking about introverts and extroverts. And for me, just as an individual, introvert, extrovert aside, I like structure. I thrive on structure. Everything in its place and a place for everything. And because there's no structure for the life of an entrepreneur, because there's no roadmap for the life of an entrepreneur, I'm going into my third year and I'm still wondering, how did I get here? What am I doing here? And Lord, how long am I going to be here? So for me, my experience, it's almost a love-hate thing because you love the freedom, but man, you hate the like not knowing, you hate the no answers. And it's really hard to talk to someone who's not an entrepreneur and have them understand what you're going through. Just like what Chandra was saying, other people just don't get it unless they're an entrepreneur. And even entrepreneurs have their own story. So it's just, you really have to find people that can come alongside you. And I encourage folks to have a board of advisors. So you might want to write this down. On your board of advisors, everybody, you want to have a coach, a mentor, a cheerleader, a sponsor, and a champion. I'll say it again 2 more times. A coach, a mentor, a cheerleader, a sponsor, and a champion. One more time. On your board of advisors, you want to have a coach, a mentor, a cheerleader, a sponsor, and a champion. Now, those of you who've heard me speak at another Viola event before, you've heard this before, but for those of you who have not, let me tell you the difference. A coach is going to ask you empowering questions that help you figure it out for yourself. A mentor is going to share stories with you. Yes, that's correct. On your board of advisors, mentor, coach, cheerleader, sponsor, and champion. Yes, thank you, Bella. A mentor is going to share stories from their own experience that might help you in whatever season you're in. A cheerleader, they're always going to tell you you're awesome. Even if you totally messed up, they're going to tell you, but you're awesome because you tried, right? And everybody needs a cheerleader in their corner. Your sponsor, they are going to put your name forward for projects and activities, high visibility things. And a champion, they're actually going to open doors for you and bring you alongside them and broker relationships for you. As you're coming up as an emerging professional or in your educational career, you really want to build a board of advisors. And you probably have each one of these in your life. You just haven't sat down and thought about the discussions that you have. So if you got someone that you go to and you notice, every time I go to them for answers, they're asking me questions, that's your coach. If you go to someone who can always have a story that resonates with right where you are in life, that's your mentor. If you've got somebody who's always telling you, you're so wonderful, God created you to do some great things, that's your cheerleader. If you've got someone who says, you might want to get involved in this project, that's your mentor, or I'm sorry, your sponsor. And if you've got someone that says, hey, Zoe, I want you here and I want you doing this, let me introduce you to these folks, that's your champion. Now, as you're progressing through your career and you're in a corporation, you want to make sure that you've got these people in different levels of the organization, especially when you get to your sponsors and your champions. Those are senior directors, junior executives, even senior executives that actually have the clout and the network to be able to do that. All that being said, don't discount anybody from your board of advisors, but don't just put anybody on there. And what I mean when I say don't discount anybody, make sure that you're not just looking for people who the world might think is awesome. Find somebody who loves the Lord and believes in you. That's most important, because sometimes on your board of advisors, you need someone with the sensitivity of the Holy Spirit to say, can I pray with you about that? And we all know prayer fixes a myriad of whatever's going on as an entrepreneur. What else?
Thank you.
Sure.
What does it mean? What does it mean to be a female entrepreneur?
I think to my earlier point, I don't know. That's really hard to answer because I see myself as an entrepreneur. If you ask me about being a Black female entrepreneur, I think we've talked about some of those challenges already. Sometimes being underestimated, sometimes being undervalued, underappreciated. All of those things go with that until people get to know me, and then they make some other realizations. Now, when I say that, I don't want you to walk away from here thinking that I believe that of everyone. That's not the case, because some people just gravitate towards me because I'm a cool person. But sometimes, you have to recognize the fact that people come with biases. If you've got a brain, you've got a bias. And your fast brain back here is always going to be over biases until your slow brain causes it to stop and say, well, wait a minute, this is a different situation. This is a different person. Let's play the movie on this. So we all have biases about something. We do. So when I talk about being a Black woman entrepreneur, I'm recognizing that there are biases out there against me. On the same note, I also know that there are people from all walks of life who are in my corner. When I was an internal coach, my biggest client pool were white males who sought me out. Now that I'm out here in the public circle, I'm having people of all different backgrounds and belief systems approach me. And I see that as a real blessing, because whether people know it or not, the way I talk, I base a lot of my um, catchphrases in scripture. Like when I talk about gifted to shift, we all know that the Bible talks about our giftings. When I talk about package with potential for purpose, we all know that the Lord has a purpose for all of us. And again, when I talk about finding answers from within, I'm talking about the Holy Spirit. So I'm preaching to people and they don't even recognize it. And the Lord is allowing me to plant seeds along the way that someone else is going to come and water, and someone else is going to come and fertilize, and someone else is going to come and harvest, right? So I don't want anybody to leave here, saying Dr. Anita thinks everybody's against her because she's Black. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I recognize that for some people, all they're going to see is this until they see that little PhD. Then they're going to look at me differently. And some people are just going to accept me because I'm me. Those are the folks that we're trying to reach. And that is regardless of whether or not you're in my profession as a diversity, inclusion, and belonging consultant, or whether you're in any profession. Am I right about that? If I'm right, somebody give me a smiley face on there.
Yep.
Where's my smiley faces? Or give me some of this right there. You go, a thumbs up, whatever. Okay, all right. I want to make sure you're all with me. I got the right crowd out here. Okay, I like that, Noah. Oh, she's speaking truth.
Yeah,
All right.
I love that. So yeah, I think those, as always, like all of your wisdom is really, really helpful for us to, understanding what it would mean, as a woman going on this entrepreneurship route. But yes, since we are talking to like people in college, the majority of us are currently in college, and some of us might be thinking of going into the same route as you are, or you are on right now, doing entrepreneurship. So if you had the chance to, go back into your 20s, like what would you do? What would you do differently? What's your advice for 20-year-olds starting their own ventures?
You stumped me. That was not on my list of questions to prepare for. What would I do? My 20-year-old self. Okay, so for starters, and this applies to everybody, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're, a corporate career person, which is just as good. I would say that, first of all, I'd be a lot kinder with myself. I'm very, very hard on myself. And sometimes, depending on the situation, the audience, I introduce myself as a recovering perfectionist because I've had a AAA personality and been really intense for years. And when I went back to school for my PhD, I forgot how to spell fun. to be perfectly honest with you. And to be absolutely transparent, on the day of graduation, on the day of graduation, it was a little anticlimactic because I had worked so hard. I had worked so hard and I had driven myself so much to get that degree in just under 3 years that as I was walking across the stage, all I could think of was, what did I miss in these 3 years? Because even before I went back, I contemplated and prayed about going back for my PhD for about a year before I actually went. And I talked with my husband, I talked with my family, I said, look, today's so-and-so's birthday, we're having a celebration, but if I go back to school, I may not be able to come, or I can only stay for a little bit, or I may have to bring a book with me, right? So I prepared everybody about what I envisioned it to be, and it would mean that I would have to not be present. And as I was getting that degree, I was thinking, was it really worth it to not be present just to have this thing done in about 3 years? So I would say to my 20-year-old self, be more gracious with yourself, be more forgiving of yourself, and be a little less intense. Because the time that God has for you here is the time He has for you here. You don't have to grind so hard and try and get everything done. That's not to say don't have goals, and that's not to say don't put timelines on things. But please hear me when I tell you, don't grind so hard. Don't be so quick to get out there and have the corporate job. You've got the rest of your life to have to pay bills. You've got the rest of your life to have a mortgage. You've got the rest of your life right now while you're in college. And college is not necessarily about ages, it's about stages. You can be in college at 23, you can be in college at 53. But be very, very careful that while you're pursuing your education and your academic success, that you don't lose sight of life. Please hear me. Don't lose sight of life. Now, for those of you who are, so I'm under the understanding that pretty much everyone here is going to be an entrepreneur, but that doesn't mean that you have to go straight into entrepreneurship right after graduation. There's value in having a corporate job so that you can understand some things. And I was recognizing, I'd say within the last year of being at my company, before I even knew that I was going to be laid off, that I was beginning to realize that the wonderful programs that I was creating for the company who was paying me to create these wonderful programs, but they weren't implementing them, the Lord was showing me, you're not doing this for them, you're doing this for you. You got the space right now. You're creating things that they're not going to use, but it's not lost, because what they're not implementing, you're going to implement for yourself as a consultant when I move you there. So I would tell my younger self, whatever you're learning at another company, treasure it and figure out, how can I monetize this for myself? I'll never forget a time where I was in between jobs and I was doing temp work, and I was so blessed to be able to be at Disney. And I actually got paid to test out all the rides in California Adventure, one of the most fun jobs in the world. That's right. Yes, I got paid to test the rides on California Adventure. But before I got there, I had to do some secretarial stuff. And I remember it wasn't too long after I got my first master's there at Biola. And I went home one day after work and I was like, Mommy, even as a young adult, I call my mom Mommy and I call my dad Daddy. I said, Mommy, they're asking me to do all this stuff that I paid somebody to do for me. I used to have an admin to do this stuff. And she said, Sweetie, you have to remember, they don't care that you've got a bachelor's and a master's. They care what you're going to do in that role. So while you're there, what can you learn? And what I learned while I was there, and you're going to think this is crazy. Give me a second. What I learned when I was at Disney was the power of a project folder, because it kept me so completely organized. Now, who would think that a project folder could be life-changing? But I tell you, in every job that I went to after that, when I implemented project folders, everybody's like, wow, you are so organized. You are so together. And I use project folders today. So don't discount the simple things. And the Bible tells us not to despise small beginnings, right? So, for those of you who might have had a lemonade stand or paper route like I did, I guess now that I'm talking to you, I'm realizing I've been an entrepreneur all along. I guess I just didn't really know it because I've always liked having my own money so I could go shopping and not have somebody tell me I can't have something. So I guess I just told on myself I'm a little bit of a shopaholic. But I pay my tithes and my offerings and I support Biola, so it's all good. What else?
Yeah, and that's the important part. But yes, I'm looking at our Slido link, and we have some questions that our audience is asking. And if you do have other questions, please add them on there so we can help you ask them to Dr. Anita. And I think Noah also put in the chat that if you wanted to text the message directly to Noah on the chat, you can do that as well, so we can help you ask them. But yes, we will now move on to our live audience Q&A, and I'm pretty sure you all came here so that you could hear from our lovely Dr. Anita, and you've got a little bit of her wisdom already. But if you have any direct questions that you'd like to ask her right now in relation to whatever you're facing right now and what situation, yes, please do that. And we're going to allow maybe 2 minutes for you to ask some questions, and we'll continue with our Q&A. But yes, in the meantime, we can ask the current questions they're already on there. And basically, there is a question from Anonymous. It's this: I find myself really nervous working in an industry mainly run by older men with years of experience. Have you ever felt that pressure? How did you handle it?
I have felt that pressure, and how I handled it was remembering that whenever I'm asked to be in the room, I'm not in competition with those who ask me. I'm not the subject matter expert in their expertise, so they're not looking to me to do that. I'm the subject matter expert in my expertise, and that's what I need to bring to the table. So if you remember that if someone invites you to have a seat at the table, and right now I'm talking specifically to my women, if someone invites you to have a seat at the table, have something to say. So I want you to all write down these 3 things. Either have a smart inquiry, provide relevant information, or amplify the voice of someone else. So inquire, inform, or amplify. And this is something that I would like to ask everyone to do. Anytime you're attending a meeting, I don't care if it's at Biola, I don't care if it's at your church, I don't care if it's at some kind of volunteer organization, I don't care if it's an internship. Always arrive at the meeting with an inquiry, with a piece of information, or with an opportunity to amplify someone else's voice. Always arrive with a smart question, always arrive with relevant information, and always look for opportunities to amplify someone else's voice. In so doing, you're creating social capital because people see you as someone that they want to connect with. And so now we're getting a little bit into office politics. And office politics is usually a term that people are like, ooh, go away. But office politics, if you think about it, it's about power, but power doesn't have to be ugly. Christ had power and he was meek. Let's not confuse meekness with weakness. Meekness is power under control. And so when you go into a meeting with either a smart question with some relevant information or amplifying other people's voices, you are inviting and actually attracting yourself to other people who want to be in your circle. And when you expand your circle for altruistic reasons, you're building your power base. And as you build your power base, you're creating social capital for yourself.
Our second question is, I aspire to be an entrepreneur. However, being an engineer myself, I'm constantly worrying since I feel I lack the necessary business skills. How do I move on?
Google. I Google everything. If I don't know readily, or if I haven't experienced something before, I Google everything. Even if it's something that I have an idea about, I Google everything. And it's not necessarily to copy something. Like I was creating a service offering just yesterday, and I'm like, all right, how do I frame this? Is it a syllabus? Is it a quote? What do I do with this? And so I was just Googling and looking at different formats. I printed them all out, but by the time I got done with the formats, thinking about how I wanted to shape this thing, I was looking at a proposal that I'd already written and said, I've got this. Why am I looking at other people's stuff? So sometimes you can look at Google because you just don't know. And sometimes you can look at Google and it reminds you, oh, I've done this. Let me go back to my files. So I Google everything, and YouTube is great too. I'm not too much into YouTube, but you find a lot of stuff that you need to know just by being curious and going to the internet. That being said, you have to take information that you find on the internet with a grain of salt. We all know that, right? We all know that, right? Okay, all right.
Yes. So Google is your best friend.
It is.
And okay, our next question is also from Anonymous. What advice would you give to someone who is doubting their abilities? What can we do when we aren't believing in ourselves, but still have a vision in sight?
Anonymous, when I figure that out for myself, I'll call you because I have doubts all the time. I have doubts all the time. And so I'm sitting in my home office right now. This is not a virtual, this is like my real home office. I've got books up here. I've got my Pepperdine diploma right there. I've got my Biola diploma right there. I've got my 2 diplomas from Fielding right there. I've got certifications on these walls to remind me how equipped I am. I've got content all over the place that if you're in my office, you'd be like, Dr. Nita, how do you find anything? Sometimes I don't know. I've got shelves full of books. I've got enough artifacts to remind me that I've got this, that you would think I didn't have any doubts. But because I'm a human being, and because the enemy likes to just plant doubts in our head, it's part of the process. And so one of the things that I tell clients, whether they're executives that I'm coaching, whether it's a leader and team workshop that I'm doing, you just have to trust the process. And with God, so here's a favorite analogy that I've been using ever since I can remember. How many people have seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? Let me see. Okay. And you remember that scene in the movie where he's got to cross this great divide, and he just kind of steps out there and everybody's like, oh, he's going to go over. But that's when a step comes out, right? And it's not until he steps again that he sees another step. And it's not until he steps again that he sees another step. That, to me, is the perfect analogy of entrepreneurship and trusting the process. You have to put your foot in motion sometimes before God will provide a step for you to land on, but you have to have faith that he's going to do that. I hope that answered the question, because that's what I think about when I have my doubts. Okay, Lord, but I'll give you a prime example. These 6 books back here, I am so scared to put them on my website because I'm not sure who's going to order them. I'm not sure who's going to find value in them. I'm just not sure. Terrified to do it. But I have to do it because I know when I wrote them, God gave me a specific message. So I just got to pull the trigger. So I hope that right there helps somebody. I'm suffering from it like everybody else. And I just think it's part of the entrepreneurial journey. I really do.
Our next question from Anonymous is, how do you balance being quick on your feet in terms of responding to people while still actively listening?
I love that question. One of my clients asked me that just the other day. She said, Dr. Nita, how do you like reframe in the moment? So I'll tell you, this is something else that I share with my manager clients and executive clients. Write this down. Listen to understand, then listen to solve. Listen to understand, then listen to solve. So many times I've had discussions when I'm coaching leaders or executives, and we're paid to solve problems. If you've got a job, even as a service provider, you're paid to solve somebody's problem. But you first have to listen to understand what they're telling you, then you start listening to solve the problem. If you listen to solve the problem first, you might insert yourself into a situation that you have no business being in. So when you listen to understand and you've really understood, you might understand that, oh, I'm not the person you need to talk to. Let me hook you up with Bella. And then you're done. But if you're listening to solve, you're moving from A to Z, getting yourself in all kinds of stuff that's not in your wheelhouse. It's not in your area of subject matter expertise. And actually, nobody asked you to get involved. But because you're so busy listening to solve, you feel like, and it's from a good place, you feel like you have to insert yourself in the situation. Always first listen to understand, then listen to solve. Now, as far as answering questions right off the bat, it's called reframing. And reframing is simply this: what else could be driving this conversation? So I was talking with a client yesterday. He is the vice president of one of the organizations where I consult. Now, I say vice president not to impress you with the fact that I work with vice presidents, but to help you understand that the same questions you're having today, executives have. So I want you to realize that. That's why I bring that to your attention. But he's saying, okay, I got to give somebody a performance review, and I'm thinking it's going to go this way, and they rated themselves up here, and I'm like, no, you're really down here. And I said, well, how can you reframe that discussion? Because I know you're not confident that they're going to take it well. And he's thinking, I said, well, how about this? Why don't you ask them, where would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? And they say 7. All right. Tell me why you would rate yourself that way. And they would say, why? Tell me what areas you feel like you could improve in. And they would say, why? Then as the manager, you go back and you say, all right, you've rated yourself as a 7. You've told me why, and you've told me your areas of improvement. I see you as a 7. I'm sorry. You rated yourself as a 7. I see you as a 4. These are the reasons why I'm rating you as a 4, and these are the areas that I see for your improvement. What is the gap that you see that we need to close? And let that person answer that question for themselves. Here's the difference, and I'm going to get to your question about how I'm able to reframe in the moment. The difference is if a leader tells someone, you're 4 and here's why, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, how do you think that person's going to feel when they leave? Are they really going to be inclined to implement any of the suggestions that the leader has? Not necessarily. But if you ask a person why they rate themselves as such, you can hear that first and then compare that with your own thoughts. And based on how they answered, you might realize, oh, the reason I'm seeing them here is because there's a barrier that I need to remove for them that I never would have discovered had I just come in and said, this is why you're 4 and this is what you need to fix. And so when we talk about reframing, it really goes back to listening to understand. And a manager in a performance review, if they're right off the bat telling you stuff, are they listening? No. And if they're right off the bat telling you stuff, are they listening to understand? Absolutely not. But if they start that conversation differently and they're listening to understand, so they reframe from, I'm going to deliver information in this performance review to, I'm going to be curious in this performance review, it may reveal some things that will help the manager understand why there's such a differential between the way they rated themselves and the way the manager rated them. And now it's a completely different conversation. And do you know that this gentleman said to me, I had never seen it that way before. That's the power of reframing, because you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes, giving them the benefit of the doubt, and really being curious as to what's going on instead of assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs that you're placing in the situation unfairly and probably unnecessarily.
Really good. And I think our next question is, um, do you think certain majors are better equipped to be entrepreneurs? Or is it more on continuing to learn and gaining experience throughout your life?
To answer that question, I would say that it's not necessarily about a major. I'd say it's about your passion. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And that is so true. I remember one time, and I kid you not, I had a 16-hour day, but I was so on fire and so in the zone and so in the flow that it didn't seem like it. I told myself as I was going to bed, okay, think of this as a 4-hour nap and get up and do it all over again tomorrow. When you're passionate about what you're doing, I really don't think your major counts, because I've met so many people that majored in one area and they're passionate in something else, and that's what they're doing. And for that reason, I would suggest to people, not you all, of course, but I would suggest to people who are trying to figure out their path, whether it's on the corporate ladder, whether it's entrepreneurship, take your time and go to a 2-year, get your AA first, because during that time you're saving a whole lot of money and you have the time to figure it out. And again, it's based on your passion, not necessarily your major. Too many people have majored in one thing and their passion is something completely different. So that's my perspective on that. Passion is huge. And I think your passion comes from how God gifted you.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true. Some people can, may not have had the opportunity to learn in depth about something, but then if they do have the passion for it, then it just sets them up for learning, and they probably learn a lot faster than people who don't have a passion for it.
Absolutely. You can do anything that you've got a passion for.
Exactly. And yes, and I think our last question from the audience Q&A is, have you ever faced racism or discrimination? If so, how did you handle them? I think you might have talked a little bit about this in the beginning as a Black entrepreneur, Black female entrepreneur. And so you're probably the minority group. And yeah, give us your thoughts on that.
So as a part of my experience, how do I answer this? As a part of my experience, in somebody's eyes, I'm always going to be the other. And sometimes it's intentional. It's always based in ignorance. And when I say that, I don't mean that in a derogatory, snarky way. Ignorance because you don't know me as an individual, or ignorance in that because you only believe what is presented to you in media about Black success, and it's usually either in entertainment or sports, not a Black female PhD. Ignorance. I'll give you a prime example. I remember one year I was walking across the parking lot with the person who was my major account rep, and we both supported the same account. And I was walking to my car, he was with me, and I stopped. And at the time, it was an S-Class Mercedes, and it was the biggest, prettiest S-Class Mercedes there was. And after I'd gotten what I needed out of my car, he looked at me. He's white. He looked at me and said, "Is your husband white?" And I'm like, "Where's that come from?" Yeah, that is what he asked me. Where does that come from? I don't remember how I replied, but that situation happened over 20 years ago. And I tell this story a lot for a lot of reasons. Number one, he asked me, because I was driving a Mercedes, "Is your husband white?" And what that said to me was, only a white guy can afford to give you this type of car. Never mind the fact that I could have afforded the car myself, right? Then the assumption goes further to say, without saying it, a Black guy couldn't do the type of job that it takes to afford you that. And what would have been a better discussion would have been, "Oh, what a nice car. What does your husband do?" Again, we're not even going to talk about the fact that I could have afforded it on my own. But had he said, "What does your husband do?" I could have said, "He's a major account exec, just like you are." And then a follow-on response from him would have been, "Oh, we should have lunch, or, dinner sometime with our spouses," to tap into some cultural curiosity, right? So his approach could have been, "What a nice car. To connect with me, he could have said, what is it that, your husband does? And then to tap into diversity, he could have said, why don't we all have dinner? Now, here's why that's relevant today. Because the last time I checked, and it was last year, he is now president and CEO of that same corporation. And if he's at the top of the corporation and he has not raised his awareness about what he thinks Black men can and can't do to bring money into the company, then what does the leadership pipeline look like? Is it still white guys at the top? Because he's under the assumption, just like he was 20 years ago, that a Black guy couldn't bring in the money from a major account like a white guy could. That's how systemic racism continues to exist. And it's not that it's intentional necessarily, but people's lack of awareness, right, perpetuates these things. And this is how it happens. I'll give you another example. I used to travel a lot. And when I was traveling, for whatever reason, I'm just going to be honest, white people in the hotel would always ask me where stuff was. And so the last time somebody asked me that, I said, why are you asking me that? And she said, oh, you look so official. So the message is, I can only be looking official if I'm a Black person working in a hotel, versus I can look official because I happen to be a CEO representing a company and I'm here on a business trip like you are. Or when I go into Neiman Marcus, having returned from the third floor because I had to return a jacket and I'm looking through the racks like anybody else, someone asked me, oh, do you work here? As if to say, as a Black woman in Neiman Marcus, the only way you can be in here is because you work here, not because you're shopping in here. These are the kinds of things that I deal with on a regular basis. And sometimes you just have to chalk it up again to innocent ignorance. And I don't mean to be derogatory. I'm saying that was an ignorant question, but you're asking it in innocence because maybe you don't have anybody in your circle that looks like me to know that I can afford to shop at Neiman Marcus. I can afford to drive a Mercedes. And again, I'm not saying these things to be materialistic. I'm saying that because we associate success with these things, you're assuming that I can't be successful and have these things on my own. Those are my experiences. So you asked the question, so I'm giving it to you. I'm keeping it real with you. And some people may be uncomfortable by this topic, but it is what it is. And I thank God that some of the things that I've been through that were really, really very hurtful, He's given me the grace to kind of put them aside and go into this work with a different perspective, a perspective that says, they don't know because they probably never spent any time with me based on the generation that they came from. And if they were raised in an environment where all that was around them was who they are, I can't fault them for that. I have to show and extend grace. At the same time, as an adult in a very diverse world, and certainly a very diverse workforce, it's incumbent upon you to become culturally curious about people. It is what it is. And how many times do we have to hear the statistics that say companies that are culturally diverse, that are truly inclusive, and that really value everyone's voice so that everyone feels a sense of belonging, their profits are 35% higher. So when we talk about the spectrum of belonging, you can either be on this end of the spectrum that says, I just value everybody's voice, or you can be on this end of the spectrum that says, I'm out for number one, I want my bonus. So if you're on this end of the spectrum and you value everybody's voice, you're going to get it. But even if you're on this end of the spectrum and you say, I just want my bonus, when you think about the fact that companies that embrace diversity, inclusion, and belonging have a 35% higher profit margin, you can connect who you really are if you're really about your bonus by making sure that everyone around you is comfortable enough to contribute and make sure that those profits go up. Now we're bringing you over here to the other side that says, I value diversity and inclusion. Do y'all see that? So when I have these discussions, I never come at it from race. I never come at it from reaching agreement about the importance of diversity and inclusion. I always come at it from, let's have real relationships. And once you're courageous enough and culturally curious enough to establish real relationships, then eventually you will come to the side where we can reach agreement about why this is important.
Yeah, thank you. That's a lot of the real facts that we need to know. And also, thanks for the reminder of having to be gracious when people, make mistakes, and, not having to, not having to force people to, get them to be culturally curious. You have to slowly get them there. It's a gradual process, right? Yeah. Since we have a few minutes left, we wanted to open the floor to everybody on this call to just kind of unmute their mics and maybe ask any questions that you would like to ask Dr. Anita, or if you just had anything you would like to share, maybe about your experiences or anything that's related to what we discussed tonight.
Well, real quick, we have a question from, I believe it's Natua. And she said, what have you observed about the way that women in your field present and hold themselves? And what advice or specific tips would you give to those of us who may find it hard to take up space when we are the minority because of race, gender, background, age, etc.?
That is a very insightful question. The first thing I would say is remember who you are as a princess or a queen of the Most High God. Remember that. As a prince or a king of the Most High God, remember that. But specifically to the women, remember that. Yes, all right, queen, remember that. And if you're in a space and a place that feels uncomfortable, the Lord put you there for a reason. Sometimes that reason is simply to be gracious. If I were to correct every person who said something to me that was inappropriate or unkind, I would have more money than I could think of, and I'd be too tired to spend it. You can't go around correcting people. People will either accept you or they won't. And so you need to learn to not be attached to the outcome. And what I mean by that is if you're walking down the street and you just say hello to someone and they don't respond, you can't be attached to the outcome. You did what you were supposed to do. You spoke. And okay, so let's go to reframing. They may have lost a loved one. They may have lost a job. They may be deep in thought. They really just are not aware. Some people are simply not aware. So always be gracious. Always be gracious and never underestimate the value that the Lord has placed in you.
We had another question.
Yes.
We had another question from Anonymous. How can I feel less concerned with what others think of me and my ideas?
How can you be less concerned with what others think of you and your ideas? That's another question that you didn't prep me for, but that's a good one because we're all so concerned about how we show up. So now we're getting into the space of psychological safety. And safety is an acronym for security, autonomy, fairness, trust, and esteem. And the esteem part of that talks about how I see myself, how I think others see me, and how others actually see me. And I will tell you that depending on the situation, doesn't matter how others see you, because what makes us different makes us valuable. Some people aren't going to get you, which means that's not your tribe. If they're not open to you, that's okay. Keep moving about and doing what it is God has called you to do until he connects you with your tribe. And they're out there. They're out there for all of us.
I like that. I like your answer so much.
I'm glad you do.
I do. I'm struggling. I had been struggling. It's just for the last few months, the Lord said, why you hang on to the people that are not going to acknowledge you? And I have friends, don't expect people to do the things that you want them to do for you or be with you or be friends with you. Let it go. I did have a difficult time to do that. I say we are Christians. How can we treat each other like that?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Even though Christians can also treating you with disrespect,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, knowing that they probably coming from different different background,
Mhm.
different way of life, or different age or different time frames.
Mhm.
So I have difficult time to do that. So I am learning to let them go. I
Mhm.
can't expect them.
We also have to remember, Chandra, first of all, your friends are giving you good, godly wisdom. But we also have to remember, everybody, that people are in our lives for a season. You know, we never know how long that season is going to be, but when the Lord deems that season over, you need to be grateful for that season. You need to reflect on what you learned in that season and then keep pushing on. Some people are with us for a long time. One of my very best girlfriend, we've been friends for about, wow, longer than I've been married. So that's like, I want to say 31, 32 years, because I've been married 30 years. And you just have to remember that people in your life for a season. And sometimes, think about this, you might be in someone's life for a season. So those who seem to be leaving you, actually the Lord is moving you on so that you can bless somebody else. But
You-
most importantly, remember that we have an audience of one, and that's our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So we have room for one more question if anybody has a question or is curious about anything. This is a rare opportunity, guys. Just saying, this is a very valuable time for you to be able to ask something to Dr. Anita, and
There's a
Hi,
question.
Catherine. Question.
Hmm.
Bye, sweetie. Thanks for joining us.
So we had a question from Thessia, and it's actually from Grit. So it says, as female entrepreneurs, how do we find the in between of wanting to establish ourselves as individuals whilst honoring our future husbands, who society will sometimes give the credit for our work to?
Say that last part. I know it's not for me, but I want to hear the question.
So how do we find ourselves in between of wanting to establish ourselves as individuals whilst honoring our future husbands, who society will sometimes give the credit for our work to as female entrepreneurs?
Mm. Can I jump into that real quick?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not for me, but I would love to I have an absolutely amazing husband. Amazing. Every time I went back to school, he had my back. He did the laundry. He did the shopping. He did the cooking. He actually helped me keep the house nice. It's important to have somebody who gets it. Look at Joyce Meyer. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Joyce Meyer. Joyce Meyer has been in ministry forever. And she always talks about the fact that Dave has always been in the background because that was the role that God had for Dave, and he willingly accepted it. And so in my experience, it takes a man of faith to understand the role that the Lord wants him to be in the event that the Lord wants the woman to be out front. That said, when you're off the stage and the camera lights are off, that's your husband. You're his wife. And there's an order for that. Just like Christ is the head of the church and she is his bride, and he would give himself up for her, same thing. That's my 2 cents.
that is wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Anita, for answering a lot of our questions. I know a lot of us are just, very curious about what it's like to be in your position, having gone through so many years of, corporate, being in the corporate world, but then transitioning into entrepreneurship and starting your thing from scratch. So that's like really like not an easy thing to do, as you've mentioned before. You have had a really long day. You started, and for those who didn't catch it in the beginning, Dr. Anita like woke up at 3:30 a.m. and then she's still with us right now in the evening. So we have to thank her for sparing her time. We're just really glad you're here. And she usually does consulting. She charges for consulting. So right now we have her for free. So it's a very valuable time and a valuable opportunity. But yes, we have finally reached our closing, and it's been a wonderful evening. Thank you for asking all of your questions. And before, yes, thank you, Jessica, for reminding us. Oh, is somebody?
I was just wondering, can I talk to Dr. Anita after, I mean, later on, Dr. Anita? Because I'm a
With me
student of
tomorrow,
Bella.
please. I'd really like to go to bed.
Yeah, I know, not now. I mean,
Okay,
later on.
thank you.
The
Yes,
way that I can
yes,
contact you.
yes. If anybody wants to reach me, my email address is anita@dranita.com, and you have to spell it out, DOCTORANITA, anita@dranita.com. And really quick, Bella,
Yes.
I have a question. Who can remember what it is I said that I know about anybody before I even meet you? And if you can answer the question, I'm going to give you a copy of my book. It's called Make Shift Happen: 5 Steps to Move Yourself Forward When You Find Yourself Stuck Again. So what are the 3 things that I said I know about anybody before I even meet you?
You're gifted to shift new levels of success. You're given purpose by God. This might be paraphrased because I didn't catch all of it.
Yeah.
And you're experienced enough to find answers from within and the Holy Spirit.
Jessica, you are the winner. So send me an email, send me your address, and as soon as I unpack these books, I will send you an autographed copy.
Ah,
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it helps you.
yeah. Yo, she's from BES, so that's what's up. Yeah. So the other thing too is we found out at the beginning, Dr. Anita is also potentially looking for interns. So if you want to intern with her, could be an opportunity for you guys. And as with BES, we love connecting people with networking opportunities. So this is a great time to also, if you like what you heard tonight, could be a way for you to connect. And Bella's going to input that. All the info, you can connect with Dr. Anita in the group chat. So you guys will have all that before we leave tonight. So yeah,
Thank you. No, I appreciate that because it totally slipped my mind. Thank you.
no problem. Yeah.
Yes. And I think we, during our virtual reading room, also, Dr. Anita mentioned that she has a book coming up. It's on corporate toxicity. And maybe Dr. Anita, you want to share a little bit about that?
So that's this one. And it just kind of talks about the fact that workplaces, I'll just let you read it. I think the topic speaks for itself, but it's pretty frank. And the wonderful thing about my books, because I used to think that a book had to be another dissertation, and that's not the case. There are a category of books called thin books, and they're really very thin. All of my books are intentionally written in a very conversational tone, and they will take you less than an hour to read. And the proceeds go to my nonprofit, which is called Solving for N Foundation. And it's all about helping people figure out that thing that's getting in their way and keeping them stuck. I will tell you that they're not yet on the website for sale, but when they are, I'll reach back to Grit and I'll let you all know when they're available. But all the proceeds go to the nonprofit. So thank you for allowing me to make that announcement. Noah, thank you for reminding me about the book. I appreciate it. Bella, Noah, and Zoe, thank you so much for hosting me. This has been delightful. Thank you to so many of you that are staying up late with me. I appreciate it because I know you're in school or you might be studying or you might have a job. So thank you so much. Happy to see my guys out here. I've got 3 or 4, maybe 5 guys who joined us. So thank you all so much. Biola has such a special place in my heart. I'm actually on the Alumni Leadership Council, and reach out to me anytime. If you have a question, drop me a note on email. And if I've got time, more than happy to actually have a phone call with any of you. So God bless you and thank you so much for having me. Go Eagles.
Thank you. And before we leave, Jessica, do you want to take help us screenshot a Zoom picture? And yes, if everybody, you need to turn on your cameras or, fix your hair, we kind of want to commemorate
Fix your
this
hair, sit up
event.
nice and straight. That's it, Noah. That's it, right? Make sure that ponytail's swinging.
Exactly. And I do like 2 just in case because I want everyone's eyes open,
Yes. Okay.
Fix my glasses so you can actually see my eyes.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. All right, one more just to make sure we get everyone all smiling. All right. 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Thanks guys so much.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you. But yes, thank you so much all for coming tonight. This was a wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you so much again, Dr. Anita, for sharing with us and for all of your questions and for sticking with us until the end. And so if you would like to attend more events like this, just follow us on at Biola.ws and at Grit@Biola. We put our Instagram handles on there, and also Dr. Anita's Twitter handle on there as well. So if you'd like to go and follow. But yes, thank you so much, and have a really good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Oh, do me a favor. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Anita Polite Wilson, PhD. Please connect with me on LinkedIn so you know when I'm speaking somewhere. Thanks for having me, everybody. God bless.
Dr.
Bye-bye.
Anita. Thanks.
Thank
Grit.
you. Bye.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Ah.
Gila,